up or tell stories to people. So I think it all comes back to that. But so to answer your question, if an entrepreneur from another country comes here and shows that they have navigated this system well enough to build, to find resources. Like one of my biggest pet peeves is when somebody on Twitter says, hey man, can you give me your email address so I can send you a pitch? Like, if you're not resourceful enough to just look, my email address isn't a secret, it's on my blog. Like if you don't have the minimum amount of hustle to go find my email address, like there is no chance you're going to succeed in this business, right? If you haven't done a little bit of background, like I can't tell you how many people a day say, hey man, I'm gonna be in San Francisco, it'd be cool to catch up. And I'm like, if you didn't even just look at my Twitter bio and realize I don't live in San Francisco, like so they're interacting with me over Twitter and they haven't, like, just the minimum amount of effort. And yet you think about the real hustle, you think about, the Airbnb story was out, there was a great story on them and how many years they struggled with to put Airbnb together. You read the stories of Travis Kalanick, the founder of Uber, and how, his first company went so sideways, he moved back in with his parents, and like, so he was the CEO of this company living with his parents in their basement and trying to make stuff happen. Like, this is the kind of resilience. The people who, Shivani at InVenture I was talking about, like, she was meeting with all these heads of these banks in India, and I was like, how are you, like, like this, I mean, she's like this tall, 90 pounds. I'm like, how are you getting like these meetings with these honchos of all these banks in India? I'm like, do you have like connections or anything? She's like, nope, I just know how to make them feel like if they don't meet with me, they're gonna lose money as a result. And I'm just like, damn, that works, huh? Like that's like she's just got hustle, right? And so I think there is definitely something to be said for somebody who comes from outside of this country into this country, has shown they can navigate this system, build a network, find these resources, get themselves into the right communities of people who can be helpful to them. So that's certainly it. What I don't do is invest outside of the country anymore. And that's only because so much of what I do to be helpful, I have found requires me to be close to the company. Requires some face-to-face meetings, some problem solving. Like, you can't find the right employee, I can probably recruit from my network to help you within my existing talent pools, which are basically like San Francisco, LA, New York. You need a place to move your office to, I can probably call landlords and figure something out. You have a sideways situation with an employee, you have to figure out whether to fire them or not, I can probably show up there and talk it through with everybody and maybe mediate the dispute, Or like you need to sell the company. I don't actually know even in Western Europe, I don't know all the potential buyers. I don't have relationships with those. Here in the United States, I do. I know, like, okay, if this thing needs to get sold to Yahoo, I can call Marissa and talk about why to sell it to Yahoo. And so I found that when I invested overseas, I found amazingly talented entrepreneurs, very driven, a lot of hustle, no entitlement, no spoiled, kind of like just purely hardworking, but I was helpless. And so for me, that was like picking public stocks and just hoping for the best. And I like to play a game where I can personally impact the outcome. And that's going to come from investing in places where I feel like I've got resources to make it more likely that you're going to succeed.
Well, so circling back again, I think this notion of doing work internationally, you studied and wanted to do international work at some point in time, I think when you first started at Georgetown. Is that correct? And so
well, it's kind of funny. I went to the School of Foreign Service. I studied abroad a lot, so I was in Ireland, Spain, and Ecuador. And then later after school, I went to El Salvador to work for a while. But the problem is the United States Foreign Service doesn't pay enough money that you can afford to pay back your student loans. So
yeah, but you have some experience with that too, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. But so that was amazing. Like when it came time to finish college, I was going to make $26,000, and yet I owed $100,000 that I had to pay back. So you couldn't do it. They've since gotten better, at doing loan forgiveness programs if you go into public service and stuff like that. But at the time, it just wasn't an option. Yeah. So I had to go so I went to law school and I became a sellout and did all that. Yeah. Well, that was another $100,000, and
you just got the degree. You didn't actually go, right?
I didn't go to a lot of law school. I just got the degree. Yeah.
Well, so. We had a presentation, we've had a couple different presentations, and some of our presenters talk about failure and fail fast. And one of the things that's difficult in African culture is failure is not easy, and you don't have many different opportunities to restart. And so kind of the question going back to the Ethiopia example and others is, what advice would you have for entrepreneurs who work in environments of great scarcity, in particular when, if you don't make it the first time, you may not get a second time.
Yeah. So I bet you it feels like that more than it's truly like that sometimes. And it's funny, there is always, in every industry, there's stigma about failure, right? So it didn't work out, so you don't have it. Technology in Silicon Valley was one of the first places where they figured out that there is a real feedback loop there, that there's a reason you didn't make it. And if the reason you didn't make it was honorable, so there's no second chance for fraud or deceit or lying or any of that stuff, right? But if the reason you didn't make it was honorable, you had the wrong idea, you were too early, you spent too much money because you hired up too fast, etc., then there is an incredible opportunity for learning there. And if you engage in that hard, painful process of going back through, and we call it the post-mortem, post-mortem is a word for when there's a dead body on the table and you try and figure out how they died, right? So we do that with our companies, a post-mortem. It's got a dead company. Why did we do wrong? Why did that happen? And if you go through that very painful personal process of what did I do wrong as a leader? Where did we go wrong with the product? You can come out so much stronger and so much wiser that in our culture, I think people have really started to embrace that and be like, okay, I understand why you messed that up. You weren't lying. You weren't full, you weren't full of it. You weren't stealing money. It was just, it was early. It was wrong. You went about it too much. You were a little, hubristic or conceited. And so there's an opportunity there to restart and to have people who've been through that same process go through that and be partners in your next business. I realize that's not the case often outside of Silicon Valley. One amazing example I saw was, have you guys heard of MC Hammer?
Yes.
Remember him? Yes. By the way, this goes to my point. So I was at a tech conference once, and there was one black guy in the room, and I'm kind of like, is that MC Hammer? And I'm like he was in the audience with everybody else. This is 2004, I think. I'm like, I'm going to sound racist if I just walk up to a black guy and say, are you MC Hammer? But I'm pretty sure that's MC Hammer. And so I just hey man, this is going to sound weird, but are you Hammer? And he's like, yeah, hey man, what's going on? I was like, holy shit. And he didn't have the pants, or anything, but I'm like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I love technology. I've always been a fan of technology. I'm like, I had no idea. This is 2004. MC Hammer had been long gone from my memory, right? So I said, well, I know it's been a long time, but as a kid, I was a big fan. I was like, I was working at Google at the time. I'm like, would you come down to Google and hang out? Would that be interesting to you? And he's like, I'd love to do that. And so I went back to, a bunch of my colleagues and was like, MC Hammer wants to come hang out and learn what we're working on. And everyone's like, oh yeah, immediately. And so I got people from the Blogger team and from the search team and the Orkut team. I don't remember Orkut from back in the day, but all this stuff we were working on. And I gathered everybody around, and they went nuts for Hammer. And he loved it, and he was giving us all this great feedback on technology because he had very unique perspectives that we didn't have. And so it was very cool. But I noticed something as he walked across our employee cafeteria, people went nuts for him. And people who I thought were kind of too young to even know who he was, and people from all around the world, all over Africa, all over India, all over Indonesia. All these engineers who worked there were like, oh my God, it's MC Hammer. And so what was amazing was in the American music business, he very famously made a bunch of money and spent it all and was bankrupt, and that was it. He was over. And so I saw all of this love for him, and I went back to my friends at the music labels. Was I think you guys are missing an opportunity. Hammer is universally loved. I have never seen anything like this. Because, he failed not for the wrong reasons. He just spent all his money on his friends and his family, right? He didn't steal anybody's money. He didn't lie. He had no scandals. He just spent all of his money on his friends and family until there was none left. And so, there was honor in that, right? You can't criticize him. And he would blog. We set him up with a blog, and that day he was already blogging from he had his son born prematurely. So he went to the hospital and took a picture and was like, this, we're rooting for Sammy to come home from the hospital. And then you saw these soldiers from overseas who were like, you're really helping me. I love you. I love your faith. You're helping me get through day by day in Iraq and stuff like that. And I was just like, you're missing this opportunity. All my friends in the music industry were like, oh man, he's washed up. He's old news. I was like, wait, I thought music was just about an audience that loves you and is willing to buy your stuff. I feel like this is the guy, right? So what happened was we started getting him involved in more technology companies. And I'll tell you today, Hammer is rich. Hammer started advising in and investing technology companies and made tens of millions of dollars by being so valuable to Silicon Valley that, in essence, we kind of noticed like, okay, what they considered failure was just him spending all his money. But he's so valuable and he's got these valuable perspectives that it's been an incredible second act for him. And if in my world, he is a known technologist and hammers at all the parties and the launch events and stuff like that. Like, I'm not kidding.
It's wild.
I brought, do you guys know Wyclef? Yeah. All right. So Wyclef's a friend who I brought to an event once that Hammer was also at, and Will.i.am was another friend, and I got these three together, and they'd never met. Okay. No, but they'd never met. It was a Google event, and so here's Hammer, who the music industry considers washed up. Wyclef comes up to him and is like, "Oh my God, you have no idea. All I ever wanted to be as a kid was you." Right? He's like, and one day I was working as a busboy in a restaurant, and this little kid kept saying to his dad, like, "Hey Dad, I think that's MC Hammer, like serving our table, as the busboy, And the dad's like, no, I don't think so. And the kid's like, no, that's definitely MC Hammer at Wyclef, right? Like saying this to Wyclef. And so the dad comes over and is like, hey, I got $20 if you'll just tell them my son you're MC Hammer, okay? And Wyclef is telling this story to MC Hammer, right? And MC Hammer's like, what'd you do? Were you like offended by that? And he's like, hell no, I took the $20 one. But anyway, it was just amazing to see how he had been branded a failure, and yet had come out of that with an audience, with love, with all these skills, with this humility. And so one of the things I think that happens, I don't know if you know my story, but I lost all my money and more in the spring of 2000. I was
7 days.
Millions of dollars in debt. Like, that would have been very easy for me to just go home and live with my parents. So I came out to Silicon Valley, convinced somebody to give me a job, was working all day and all night to try and pay that money off. And then I got fired 4 days before September 11th, so I was yet again another failure, right? So I just kind of stayed in the game and hustled, and and again, it was a really bad economy. In fact, you couldn't even get a truck to move your stuff out of San Francisco because all the trucks had gone one way to everybody else's parents' home, and not come back. It was just that bad. It was just really, the economy was messed up after the crash of the bubble, they called it. But there's just this unique opportunity that I think if you separate the public perception of you as a failure and your internal perception of you, I think that's where the opportunity is, right? So the people around you may consider you like, well, they tried once and they didn't work, so. But I think if you really do a deep internal inventory and say, okay, why did I fail? And be honest with yourself about, and which of these things are traits of mine that I'll never be able to change, and which of these things are things that I know I can do better next time, right? That one of the things that I think will result from that is people can just smell resilience on you. Like, you just give it off. Think of the most successful business people around you. Like, they may succeed, they may fail, but you can just smell that they're going to come back from this, right? You just feel it around when you're around them. I remember when Kevin Systrom, who founded Instagram, was pitching me. And so at the time, I didn't really believe in photo sharing. I know that sounds hilarious now, but I had already invested in and sold a photo sharing company. I wasn't sure that photos were going to be the thing. Our phones were still slow enough that it was hard to download a bunch of photos and stuff like that. So I know that's not, I was kind of wrong in my initial judgment. So I wasn't against photo sharing. I just didn't know if it would be that big. Many, many companies had tried and failed in that space. And so, but I sat down with him. He was a smart guy. He'd worked at Google briefly. He was well referenced. And as he was talking to me about Instagram, he didn't use conditional statements like, well, if it gets this big, it would be awesome. Instead, he was just like, so when we get to 50 million users, that's when we'll roll out this next feature. And I was like, holy. And as he's talking to me, I feel like he's actually looking through me to the future, and I'm like, oh man, I better get on this train before it leaves the station. There was so much inevitability in his voice, in his pitch, that this will succeed, right? And as I think about the entrepreneurs that I've worked with that have been the most successful, Travis at Uber, and Garrett at Uber too, Ryan at Uber, I guess the co-founders there, but Kevin at Instagram, Evan Williams at Twitter, Larry and Sergey at Google, Elon Musk. Like all of these people, when you talk to them, there isn't really doubt in their voice. They just know this thing is going to work. And so when you're around them, you're like, I better get involved. Like I this is an opportunity. I know this person's going to make it. I have backed other people where my mistake was I thought their idea was good, but I didn't realize like they had so much self-doubt, or so much questioning or so much fear that they couldn't end up executing on that. And so the number one thing I look for now is not brash cockiness, right? That doesn't work. You can't be unrealistic about the challenges that are ahead of you. But I look for people who just know they're going to tackle those. Scott Harrison, who runs Charity Water, that guy could be any executive in any company. He's one of the greatest storytellers of all time. He chose to do this because it's part of his faith. He's very Christian. He really wants to give back. He knows the impact he can have. I deeply admire him. But he has built that charity like a startup. He recruits engineers from Twitter and Snapchat and Facebook and has them build actual technology and the fundraising mechanisms. And he runs it like a startup, and that's why it's been so successful. When we sat down a few years ago, he'll be like, so, in 2015, when we've got $100 million in donations, and you're just like, wait, this year we have one, But he just knows, he's just confident he'll be able to go out and find more big donors, find more partners, roll out new software. And I think that's the thing. If you come out of a failure knowing that wasn't because of who you are deeply inside, that wasn't because you stole money from people and you lied and cheated and deceived, but if you come out of a failure, you're like, I know why that happened, man. I misread the couple of people I hired. I wasn't just, as picky as I should have been in picking out who I hired for that company. I was too early with the product. I didn't listen to this feedback enough. I spent too much money on this stuff. I was distracted. I was trying to do business deals when I needed to improve the product itself. And if you do that kind of assessment and you find out, look, it's not because I'm a bad person or I'm fundamentally flawed, but you'll come out of that so much stronger that when you put your next idea together, you'll know, I deeply understand this problem that needs to be solved. I deeply understand the constituencies that I'm going to need to solve it. I know I'm going to solve it. I know this thing is work. I know I am the most uniquely qualified person in the world to do it. That's one question I ask people all the time. Why are you the most uniquely qualified person in the world to address this problem, right? And so, there's a guy named Tristan Walker who runs a company called Bevel. I guess the parent company is Walker and Company, but it's Bevel. So he sells shaving equipment for black men's faces. And so, I wasn't going to come up with that idea, but when I talked to Tristan, I'm like, what? I don't get it. Is it just, you're just marketing to a different crew? And he's like, no, you don't understand. All of these razors that, and by the way, I don't even shave anyway, so, but he's like, all these razors that have 3 blades, 4 blades, all they do is create ingrown hairs on black men's faces. And so he's like, black men need a single blade. And nobody makes single blades anymore, because it's all oriented around a white market. And he's like, and black men need a different kind of conditioner for their face to prevent those ingrown hairs and bring the hairs up to shave and this kind of stuff. And he, you ask him, why are you uniquely positioned to be the best in the world at this? And he's like, because I just spent the last 2 years getting to know every single person at Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, and Gillette, and everybody in this space. He's an incredible business person he grew up incredibly poor in a neighborhood in New York City, worked his way up, made it to Stanford Business School. And he's like, and I just know, he's like, I'm good at design. I want to make these the most beautiful products in the market, not the most beautiful products for black people, the most beautiful products in the market. And you can go to his site and check it out. It's gorgeous. But it's a hugely valuable company that will make him incredibly rich now. And he's very proud of the impact. But again, it came from one of these perspectives. Now, on the way there, he worked at Foursquare, which is a cool company. It hasn't been an incredible success, and so it'd be easy to be like, you worked at Foursquare, that hasn't really, you don't have a stamp of a Google or a Facebook on your arm or something like that. But it would have been easy to judge him. Instead, he just knew, I'm the most uniquely qualified person on the planet to do this. And when you talk to him, it wasn't like, well, if we're lucky enough that some guys buy this stuff, he just knew, I'm going to win this category. And ultimately, it's going to be a competition between Johnson & Johnson, Gillette, and Procter & Gamble, and whoever, to see who's going to pay the most to buy this out. Because there's a whole market that's been underserved here. So I don't know, those are my thoughts on failure. I think those are I'd say, by the way, similar thoughts on success. Anything you can do to develop yourself to where you are guided by your internal compass rather than your external compass is going to serve you incredibly well. It's so easy. Let me put it this way. You grew up your whole life, like, you've got your parents, like, they care unconditionally about you. You get a good grade in school, you do well in the soccer game or whatever, you've always got a good job waiting for you from your parents, right? Or your aunt or your brother or sister. Like, you've just got so you've got this feedback loop, and you're like, I can't wait to get home and show them that I got an A on this test, or I can't wait to show them that I made this really cool project, or I did this incredible drawing. And so you're always waiting for that external approval and that feedback, right? Then you get into school, and your teachers, similarly, like, they really have your best interest at heart, and they want to give you that feedback loop. And so you got a teacher who's like, congratulations, that was a good paper. Like, I love that artwork you did. Like, your coaches, too, are just like, they really want to see you succeed. And so, like, I've never seen anyone run the mile that fast, or you know what, your swimming has come a long way, or like, it's been fun to have you on the soccer team because you've been I see how hard you're practicing. And so it's all built around this external approval. And then all of a sudden you leave college or you leave high school and you're out in the world, and there's nobody there doing that for you anymore, right? Nobody cares about you unconditionally anymore. They care about how you can help them build their stuff, right? They care about you as one of the inputs in their business, or their project or their government. And there's nobody there giving you that feedback, and yet you were raised on it. You're a little bit addicted. Everything, you've always gotten a good job, and now there's nobody there giving you a good job anymore unless it suits them, unless it was a good job that made them, yes, there are people in your church, in your community center, there are definitely great bosses out there who will give you an attaboy every now and then, but nobody's personal goals completely align with yours anymore. And yet you're so addicted to that feedback that you start adapting yourself to other people's definitions of success. You start adapting yourself to other people's feedback. And yet you haven't developed this internal compass of like, wait, what's really important to me? You'll see this in your email. Open up your inbox, and there's science that says you get an actual dopamine release. When there's, like, you get a little chemical release when you see that there's new email. Even if it's not great email, you get like, oh, hey, email. You get that from text, you get that from Snapchat, you get that like, oh, hey, that's for me. Like, even though it's just like sale at, so whatever. Like, so, but you get that in your, and you'll see that you could spend all day in your email making other people happy, doing the things they're asking you to do. And yet, at the end of the day, when you close your computer, you're like, wait, I didn't actually do any of this stuff on my own to-do list. I didn't do any of this stuff that relates to my priorities, what I actually want to be doing, right? I didn't do anything about the book I want to write, about the physical fitness goal I want to meet, about this person I really want to get close to and try and introduce myself to, about this subject I really want to read more on and get to the Wikipedia and dive in and understand, about this product I want to go find somewhere I hear it's being developed. I want to go meet the inventors of it and see what I can learn. Like, no one else is asking you to do that stuff, and no one else is patting you on the back for doing it. And so it's very easy for it to never appear on your to-do list, to never, because you're just responding, you're reacting in your inbox. Similarly, it's just, as I said, it's very easy to just react to other people's definitions, other people's expectations, right? And so in conjunction with the failure discussion about looking internally, I think there's a success discussion there too, which is you could spend your whole life just conforming to other people's expectations, right? And these people who work in these big companies and are just like, look, I'm going to climb the ladder, right? And I'm going to impress this boss, and I'm going to show up, and I'm going to send emails late at night so they think I'm working all day and night, and I'm going to dress, well, and I'm going to I'm going to put in the FaceTime, right? And their goal is to work in that kind of environment where, the success criteria have been defined by somebody else, whether in a law firm or a big corporation or something like that, or a big bank. Like, I'm going to deal by somebody else's success criteria. And so, but they haven't really developed, it probably doesn't align with their own internal compass. You guys as young leaders, as entrepreneurs, as change makers, know that you probably have a very unique perspective on the world and a unique set of values. You probably felt weird in your schools, like you weren't necessarily like all the other kids because, you weren't following the lockstep pattern all the way through, right? You nodding your head when you said you probably weren't very good at going to class either. I saw you. And so as a result, I think that you need to embrace some of that, and you need to dig in and say, okay, what really does matter to me? What is going to be success as I define it? You know, how did that failure not really compromise that and instead make it more likely that I'll achieve that? How am I going to go out and actually take the initiative and hustle and get this stuff done? There's this incredible book right now. It's brand new, and it might not be as funny or interesting to you as non-Americans, but there's a guy in this country called Judd Apatow. And Judd is a comedian, but he's also producer of all these really goofy movies like This Is 40, or 40-Year-Old Virgin, or Superbad, and like just all these really, really goofy movies with Seth Rogen and James Franco and all these guys. So definitely not amazing movies, but he's been incredibly successful. And he wrote this book recently. He grew up in outside of New York, Long Island, and he always wanted to be a